Kia ora koutou, and thank you very much for the introduction. So, let me start with a question you're likely expecting. If I build you a thinking machine, will it have a soul? So today I'm going to take you on a roller coaster ride through a range of issues around artificial intelligence and automation and what it means to be human. So let us start with that really hard question that ties together theology and computing. If I build a thinking machine, will it have a soul? Now, Alan Turing, in the photo there, the eminent mathematician and the pioneer of computer science, addressed this question in his 1950 paper on thinking machines, which was published in a Psychology and Philosophy journal. Now, Turing was an atheist, so he didn't spend long on answering this question. But he was writing into a culture that was profoundly Christian, at least in the public sphere, so he couldn't ignore the question of whether a thinking machine could have a soul. So his answer was first to remind the reader that the question of whether a thinking machine has a soul is actually predicated on the fact that the idea that in order to think, you must have an immortal soul, which is on shaky foundations to start with. And then he argues that, well, God can do whatever God wants. We would not, he says, we would not be irreverently usurping God's power of creating souls any more than we are in the procreation of children. Rather, we are, in either case, instruments of his will, providing mansions for the souls he creates. So in that answer, you actually find that Christian theology has quite a lot to say on the subject. Why? Because Christian theology has spent an enormous amount of time writing and thinking about how human souls come into existence. So, for example, at what point does a child get a soul? And not unrelated to that, whether animals have souls or not. There's a lot of writing about that. So the question of whether a machine could have a soul fits very neatly into that very long history of thought. So let's move to a rather more personal question. Where is your soul located? Now, let's go quote Jesus on this one. Jesus was once asked by an expert in the Jewish law, "Teacher, which is the greatest command in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. That's the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law hangs on those two commandments." So you have a sketch there in the Bible of a threefold being, humans as being threefold, having a body, a mind, and a soul. But then the question comes, where is your soul located? How does your soul interact with your mind and your body? How does your immortal soul survive the death of your body? And if I build a thinking machine, will it also have an immortal soul? Now these questions are in many ways completely unanswerable. The soul's intangible, it can't be weighed, it can't be measured. It's challenging for science to say anything about the soul. And indeed, the science of psychology today completely rejects the concept of an immortal soul and says that the mind is where all thought resides and that the mind is comprised solely of physical matter interacting. So there's no need for a soul there. Okay, so let's leave the soul stuff to the philosophers and theologians. Let's try a simpler question, one that science might have a chance of answering. Where is your mind? Now, I don't mean your brain. I know where your brain is. I want to know where your mind is. Now, human beings are amazing creatures. In the Bible, one of the poets writes the line, "I will praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made." And our brains are probably the most amazing thing about us. The brain is the most complex structure on the planet. Your brain's what you think with, it's what controls your actions, it's what coordinates every movement you make, it's what allows you to understand what I'm saying, to analyze whether I'm making any sense, and then to argue with me later about why I am wrong. So your brain is made up of neurons, these little tiny nerve cells. That's an artist's impression of one. And each neuron takes in signals from other neurons, it processes them, and it passes them on. And you have a phenomenal number of neurons in your brain. 100,000 million of them. That's a very, very big number. There are as many neurons in your brain as there are stars in the galaxy. However, people don't tend to know how many stars there are in the galaxy, so let's try to get an idea of how many neurons there are in your brain. Assuming you have a full head of hair, there are about 100,000 hairs on your head. So how do you get to 100,000 million? Well, you go to Auckland and you shave the hair off everybody who lives in Auckland, and you then have 100,000 million hairs. That's a lot of hair. There's a lot of neurons inside your head. And every single one of those neurons is connected to thousands of other neurons to make a complex network that encompasses your thoughts and your memories and your plans and your dreams. And the connectivity of an individual neuron is utterly amazing. A single neuron in your brain can be connected to over 10,000 other neurons. That's like somebody living in Karori personally knowing everybody else who lives in Karori. There are 1,000 million connections in your brain between the neurons. And that's how everything is working up there. So the human brain is where your thoughts are, but they're not there solely in this physical structure in these neurons connected to each other. They're also in the fleeting electrical signals that flow through the neurons and their connections. And that electricity is always flowing, whether you're awake or asleep or in a coma. There's always electrical activity in your brain. And the brain only stops working when you die, when the electricity stops, even though the physical structure doesn't actually start changing immediately. So that's your brain, this dynamic electrical physical structure. But what is it that gives you a mind? What is it that gives you consciousness? Scientists call consciousness an emergent behavior. It's something that emerges from the physical. It's something that is more than the individual components. An individual neuron does not think, but 100,000 million neurons do somehow manage to think. So we are truly wonderfully made. So your brain is where your mind is, somehow, and it's where you hold your natural intelligence. So what about artificial intelligence? What's that about? So let me quote Anchali Anadaniyangan, who's a principal lawyer at the Auckland law firm Hudson Gavin Martin, and she specialises in tech, media and intellectual property. And she says, unless you're involved in the tech industry, artificial intelligence doesn't actually mean much. It's just this abstract idea. The average person will reach for the touchstones they know, the things that are in popular media. So you'll reach for Terminator, that's artificial intelligence, or Blade Runner. And the things you see in science fiction movies are not actually very helpful for what's really going on in the world. So let me try tonight to be helpful. Let me try to get away from the Terminator, rise of the robots, machines that want to kill you, and give you an idea of where artificial intelligence has come from and why it's so much in the news at the moment. So artificial intelligence goes back 70 years. It goes back to the early days of computing. This is actually the Manchester Baby, one of the computers that Alan Turing worked on. And though you may think you recognise these people, this is actually a photo from 70 years ago. So back at the start of computing, there was great hope for creating artificial intelligence quickly. The thinking was, if people can do something, surely it will be straightforward to get a computer to do that thing. And it turns out that computer scientists were way over-optimistic. People are much, much more complicated than they thought. For example, understanding natural spoken language, which is what you're all doing now, it's something a 5-year-old child can do. It turns out to be stunningly difficult to get a computer to understand natural spoken language. It's only in the last decade that we've got a computer to reliably recognize speech, and only more recently that we've been able to get a computer to understand what that speech means, provided at the moment that you stick to a very carefully constrained context. For example, you can make a computer system that handles customer service for a bank, answering very simple queries. But you can't get a speech recognition system that can engage in conversation about, say, the Jamie Lee Ross affair, or how the All Blacks performed against South Africa. So in the early days, we worked on getting computers to do what they do well, and what humans find difficult, which is to do symbolic manipulation. the sort of stuff a mathematician does, and that most of us are really bad at. So we got computers to do things like play chess, something most of us find hard. But it's easy to get a computer to play chess because there are straightforward, well-defined rules, there are clear guidelines for what constitutes a good and a bad move. And computers have been able to beat humans at chess for decades. But a chess-playing computer like this one is still just a box of tricks, doing exactly what you tell it to do. You can't hold a conversation with it, and it can't make you a cup of tea. Now today, we're well beyond the point of getting computers to play abstract games. And the reason artificial intelligence is so much in the news, and why they've put me up here to talk to you about it, is because it can do so much more today than it ever has before, and it has so much promise. After decades of struggle, there was a big breakthrough about 10 years ago in how we do AI. The computers have got big enough and fast enough to try something that turns out to actually work. And the new technology is called deep learning. It's a very swanky term. Doesn't it sound good? Deep learning. It's a very swanky term for a very simple concept. We build a computer that mimics how the human brain works in some ways. It mimics the neural structure of the brain. So you have lots of little neurons. These things here are neurons, just like in the human brain. And they're connected to lots of other neurons, just like in the human brain. And there's lots of layers of them, all connected together, just like in the human brain. And so the deep in deep learning is because this network is many layers of neurons deep. There's nothing deep about it, it's just that it's lots of layers. We call it many-layered learning. The learning part is because what you do is you feed it information where you don't know what the answer is. So this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a raccoon, and you tell it what the answer should be, and the neurons give out an answer that may be right, may be wrong, but whether the answer is right or wrong, it compares the answer it gives to the real answer that you've told it should get, and it feeds that back. And if you feed it millions upon millions of examples, the mathematical structure in here that tells it how to change the structure gradually learns how to give you right answers. Which means once you've trained it, through the learning approach, you deploy it, show it a picture of a dog it's never seen before, and it will tell you it's a dog. So we give it lots of different inputs, we tell it what the output should be, and the mathematical algorithms inside play with the connections to make sure that it produces the right output from any given input. With enough training data, you can get a deep neural network to then give the right answer to inputs it's never seen before. So it's learned how to solve that particular problem, which is actually quite similar to how you train small children. You just give them the same thing over and over and over again, and eventually they get it. Now, how's this useful? Well, for example, the stock market has for years been run by AI systems. Once this started to work, the stock market's been using old AI systems, and the deep learning systems have just accelerated this. They use AI systems to make the best possible trade. So these are two pictures of the New York Stock Exchange. On the left is the New York Stock Exchange in 1987, when human beings were doing all the trading. So that's lots of human beings trading stuff with bits of papers and computers to help them. On the right is the New York Stock Exchange last year. It's essentially now just a stage set for TV presenters to go and talk about how the economy is working. All the trading is done by computers talking to other computers. So the stock market's run by AI systems talking to other AI systems. And one of the crashes we've had was caused by the AI systems going slightly berserk before anybody could push the stop button. They've got safeguards in to stop that from happening again, they say. But, okay, that's one example. Insurance companies and banks and other financial institutions, the people who control your money, are increasingly using AI systems to make decisions about who gets loans, how much your insurance will cost, and what risks they should take. Going beyond that, you can imagine that one day we might say have an AI system that operates in court rather than a judge, weighs the evidence, decides who's guilty, decides how much the fine should be or how long the prison sentence should be. So how do we respond as humans to a computer making decisions like that? First, taking decision-making out of human hands is not a new idea. We've had systems for years that make decisions that are unfair. You have all, I am sure, at some point had somebody say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't do that because of the policy. I'm sorry, there's no..." And the depersonalisation of decision-making has been going on for decades, if not centuries. It goes on from before we had computers. But somehow, even though we know that, it seems worse when a machine is doing it. And one of the challenges of the artificial intelligence based on this deep learning idea is that there is no way of working out why the computer has made the decision. There's an awful lot of those neurons connected together. You can't slice into it and look for the decision-making stuff. It's just a whole bunch of maths. There's no way of knowing why it's making the decision. You just know it is making the right decisions. Well, you hope it does. So once you've trained it, there's no way of knowing why it's going on. There's no way to find out. We've got some people who are trying to work on that, but we still don't know how to do that. So what do? You've got a machine that makes decisions, but you don't know why it's made the decisions. And what do you do when the AI system turns you down for insurance cover? What do you do when the AI system decides that your child can't go to the high school they set their heart on? What do you do when the AI system decides that your parent is not a suitable candidate for that life-saving treatment? How do we respond as a community when the artificial intelligence system tells us things that are unpalatable? Those are questions we are going to have to face as a society. And perhaps it would be fine if we knew the AI system was completely unbiased and trusted that it was doing things for our good. That does sound uncomfortably close to a fundamentalist religious position. Trust in the almighty computer, it can't be wrong. And we already know that AI systems can be biased and can be wrong. So in a recent case, the New Zealand government used an AI system to profile illegal overstayers. Seems a good idea, let's profile who might be an illegal overstayer. The system was biased because the AI system was targeting Pacific Islanders unfairly, because the AI system had been fed its training data from a database that was based on data provided by officers who themselves had bias against Pacific Islanders. So the computer had perfectly learned the bias of the human beings. The machine is not omniscient, it's only as good as the data that was used to train it. And earlier this month, Amazon was caught out. Reuters reported that Amazon had ditched its artificial intelligence recruiting tool because they'd learned to be biased against women. Now, I've dug behind this story. It turns out Amazon were not actually using this. They were doing research into whether they could use an artificial intelligence system to speed up the recruitment process. Could you get an AI that could automatically look through the application, the CV of an applicant, and say, take 100 applications and just immediately spit out, these are the 5 the human needs to look at? It was trained by using the CVs of people who had applied to Amazon, and it was told which ones had been successful. They quickly find out that the system had firmly embedded the biases of the human recruiters. It far and away preferred male to female candidates, and would actually look in CVs for words that indicated the person might be a woman even if they hadn't said that, like if they were chair of the Women in Technology Society at their university. So the humans made attempts to tidy this up by trying to force the system to ignore those key words. And they tried for a while. But by the start of last year, they realized that no matter what they did, the AI was going to sort candidates in ways that could be seen as discriminatory. So what do? Can we trust the AI? It's only as good as its training data. And once it's trained, we don't really know why it's making the decisions. That's a big question. So then there's a challenge for us that artificial intelligence is going to take our jobs. Yes, it is. Some commentators have put job losses at 50%, 50. That will make a massive societal change. Call centers will be replaced by AI systems with fake empathy. Truck drivers will be replaced by autonomous trucks. Self-driving vehicles like these ideas these are from a movie. The sketches of what an autonomous truck would look like. There are 10,000 truck drivers in New Zealand. What would they do when they're all made unemployed? GPs will be replaced by AI decision-making systems that don't get tired and don't make mistakes, but don't understand what it means to be human. Lawyers will be replaced by systems that apply the law fairly and unbiased, but with ruthless efficiency. Teachers will be supplanted by AI systems tailored to individual children, with a teacher reduced to doing crowd control. to keep the children focused on using the automated tutoring systems. That is one view of the future. How would the church respond to that phenomenal shift in society? Let's give an example here. At the height of the Great Depression in the USA, you see unemployment was running at 25%. So 3/4 of people who wanted a job had a job. And you can see what happened there. There were people evicted from their houses. There were massive lines trying to get free food. There were people desperate for jobs. How would you cope with an unemployment rate twice that, of 50%, when so many jobs have vanished that many people have no hope of getting a job, no matter what the politicians may say? Now, some argue that AI will cause new jobs to be created, but it will not be at anywhere near the same rate as jobs are lost. So, what would the church do to help shape a society where that has happened? Another question for you then. Now, there's a more positive view. I've got the more positive view from the New Zealand AI Forum, who would probably be quite keen to be positive. They have a report called Shaping a Future New Zealand. They estimate that job losses might be as low as 10%, and that those losses will be spread over decades. Now, 10% is not as bad as 50, but it's still hundreds of thousands of individual people losing their jobs. So whatever figure's right, we're moving to a society where there will be less work to go around because the computers will be doing a lot of the drudge work. Now, I believe the church can take a lead in imagining and creating the sort of society we will become. Well, why the church? Because the church is a place where we believe in the importance of society, where we believe that every individual has value because they're a person, not because of what they can contribute to the gross domestic product. The church is a place where we have a solid rock to stand on in the face of a dramatically changing technological, social, environmental, and political environment. But what questions should the church ask? Well, you could ask, do you want New Zealand to continue its current trajectory? Do you want a society where there are increasing numbers of people who struggle to feed and house their families? Or do you want, as a church community, to push for a society where there is more equity, even if it means that those of us who are very comfortable become less so? Now, also, AI is not all doom and gloom. AI can be part of the problem, or it can be part of the solution. It can be used to create both types of society. It can be harnessed to increasingly force people into being passive consumers of goods and services and entertainment to profit a small number of multinational companies, or we can harness it for greater good. So what are the positives of AI after all that doom and gloom? Let me give you two examples. First, education. Now imagine personally tailored education for every child that takes them at the right speed for them, develops them to their fullest potential, builds on their strengths, gives them strategies to get them through their weaknesses. Sure, such a system can only go so far. Socialization, empathy, and relationships will still need to be mediated by a human being working out how that sort of stuff works. But imagine the change to our society if you really could personalize education, if you really could train each individual to their fullest potential. It will mean that we will pick up those who currently fall by the wayside, and we will develop our best and brightest kids far beyond what is possible today. That would be phenomenal. That would be an enormous benefit to all of society. Then there's medicine. The New Zealand AI Forum, again, tells us that there's immense potential to save both lives and money through AI systems. We've recently developed AI systems that are able to diagnose melanoma. This is some melanoma. Some of them are benign, they're not going to harm you. Some of them are malignant, you need to get rid of them. AI systems have been trained on this data, and they are much, much better and much more consistent than any human expert could ever hope to be, because no human expert is going to look at millions and millions of photographs of melanomas, but an AI system can do that. So the AI learning system can spot the cancer very reliably. It's a really specialized skill, and it demonstrates that there's enormous potential to combine the best of what computers can do with the best of what humans can do. So a computer can diagnose you with malignant melanoma. a human being can come alongside you, can bring comfort and hope and love, and if things get to the worst, they can be beside you when you're dying and be that comfort at the end of life. So you could have a future in which we combine the best of what computers can do with the best of what humans can do to the benefit of everybody in society. Now, I haven't yet talked about these guys, robots. Robots are the things that immediately spring to mind when we talk about artificial intelligence. Now, these are real robots built by the world leader in robotics, Boston Dynamics. The company has been researching legged robots for over a decade. You've got the four-legged versions on the right and the two-legged versions on the left. The most human-like research robot, the one on the left, and these are all research models, has been gradually getting better. So Atlas is now able to jog and jump and even do a backflip. You can go on to YouTube and look at the videos of him doing that. And just 2 weeks ago, they released video of him doing parkour. So this is him jumping up a bunch of things. He makes a hang of a loud noise when he's doing it. But to be able to get a robot to autonomously detect the environment and do this is just amazing. Now, while this is extremely impressive, all the other systems I've talked about so far are not robots. They've all been computers working away in a box, whether it's on your desk or at the stock exchange or something like this in a big data center. And it turns out that robots are not what you need to worry about. Not at the moment. They're not where the main advances in artificial intelligence are happening. The advances are happening inside perfectly normal computers, big and small. But our fascination with robots does tell us a great deal about what it means to be human. Why are we so fascinated with robots? It's because they look like humans. We have a tremendous propensity to anthropomorphize, to project human behavior into other things, into our pets, our livestock, our cars, and yes, our robots. So one trend that does worry me is the belief that robots can be used to do a great deal of the care of the elderly. So this is from a movie that addresses exactly this issue. The reason here goes that there are lots of lonely old people who need care, and it's very expensive to provide humans to give that care. So it'd be great to provide them with robots to provide both care and companionship. But on the care side, we are still a long way from a robot that could autonomously care for the needs of a frail elderly person. There have been amazing advances in what robots can do in the last 5 years. Some robots are now able to pick themselves up when they fall over. Some are able to remember to plug themselves into the electricity when they're running short of power. But robots still, by and large, need a human to keep an eye on them to make sure they are not doing something dangerous. If you look at the Boston Dynamics videos, you will see how the humans make sure the robot, if the robot goes rogue on them, they're not going to get hurt. So robots are still a bit like having a toddler. You've got to keep an eye on it at all times. And as for companionship, well, elderly people have had autonomous companions for decades. They're called cats. A cat can do quite a lot more than a robot can currently do. Though you do have to feed it and change its litter tray. So let's stop for a moment to consider cats. What sort of intelligence does a cat have? That is akin to asking what sort of intelligence a computer could have. And some artificial intelligence researchers argue that intelligence is some sort of continuous space, where there are less intelligent things and more intelligent things. And so at one end, there's something that behaves entirely on instinct, say a millipede, and then you move through a range of increasingly intelligent things like a cockroach, a mouse, a cat, a monkey, a human. And then if there's a continuous scale, then you can go beyond human to something that's more intelligent than a human. And the idea is that we currently are building things with about the intelligence of a cockroach, and we'll be able to make things more and more intelligent. And at some point we'll make something that's more intelligent than a human, and at that point, the computer takes over and it builds the next machine that is even more intelligent. Now, futurologists calls that the singularity, when the machines get so intelligent that they can design the next generation and they leave us behind. And the estimate is that the singularity is 20 to 30 years away if you believe in this continuum of intelligence. A way that it's not of immediate concern, but it's close enough that most of us will see whether it actually happens or not. But it does assume that intelligence is a continuum. It's a continuous scale. That there isn't something that differentiates us humans from animals, some fundamental thing, or that differentiates all animals from machines. So, take my cat for example. I have been watching my cat for the last 2 weeks looking for signs of intelligence. And certainly the cat is able to learn, but then AI systems can learn. It's learned where food is, it's learned how to get in and out of the house, it's learned which humans feed her, which is me, and which humans to go to for warmth, which is not me. On the other hand, almost everything she does is actually built-in instinct. She'll pace the boundaries of the rooms, which is an instinct to check the boundaries of territory, just as a tiger does in the jungle. And she'll suddenly and seemingly randomly stop whatever she's doing to lick her fur. But her cleaning routine, how a cat cleans itself, is just an amazing piece of programming. A cat will wash its entire body over the course of the day. So they never look mangy or out of place until they're old and sick. And they do that from when they're born, so it's built in to the programming in their brain. Wow. So is my cat intelligent? Does my cat think? I don't know. And you probably don't know either. It really does depend on what you mean by intelligent and what you mean by think. I do know that it's awfully easy to anthropomorphize, to project human feelings into the cat, the same way that we project human feelings into a robot, because it looks like a person. We think cats are incredibly selfish. We think cats are only out for themselves, for what they can get. They don't care about you except insofar as you provide something for them, be it food or warmth. But that stuff we're projecting into them is actually just pre-programmed behavior. That's just the way cats are. Dogs, while more intelligent than cats, also have pre-programmed behavior, but their behavior is based around a pack structure. And a lot of your dog's behavior towards you is because he believes that you are the leader of the pack. And if you're the leader of the pack, he is absolutely determined to stay on your good side no matter what. So, these questions of whether animals have intelligence, whether machines can have intelligence, lead to a whole range of interesting questions about what it means to be human. Theologians have contemplated animal intelligence for centuries, and some of that thinking can be brought to bear on what it would mean for a machine to be intelligent. For example, let's go back to that question, can a computer think? The question that Alan Turing was asking in 1950. And it's a question that's exercised philosophers and computer scientists for decades. So to answer this, I need to talk about weak artificial intelligence and strong artificial intelligence. Weak AI is the sort of AI in all my examples so far. It's a computer that can do a particular job that you would otherwise think that you might need a human to do. For example, diagnosing melanoma or answering the phone at a call center. We know we can already build weak AI because we've done it. But we also know that a weak AI system is not thinking. It's just doing what it was programmed to do. On the intelligence continuum, if you believe in it, it's about the level of a cockroach, just reacting exactly as it is programmed to do. Strong artificial intelligence, on the other hand, is an artificial intelligence that can deal with general problems. It uses its knowledge of the world and its intelligence to handle novel situations. It can do much more than, say, a cat. A strong artificial intelligence, which you could also call an advanced general intelligence, could hold a decent conversation with you. It would be a thinking machine. It would be self-aware. Self-awareness is one of the important things about a general intelligence, a strong artificial intelligence. That's strong AI, something that's indistinguishable in its thinking from you or me. We haven't built a strong AI. We do not know whether we can build a strong AI, ever. Most computer science researchers think that it's just a matter of time before we have strong AI. They believe in this continuum, they believe that we're working our way along it, And they believe that we will one day, and within the next couple of decades, create a computer that can think better than a human. And that computer will then design an even better computer, and so on, leaving humans completely out of the loop, with hyper-intelligent computers developing ever more clever computers, and then doing whatever it is that hyper-intelligent computers want to do. Now, counter to that, some believe that this will never happen. My friend Peter Robinson, who's Professor of Computer Technology at Cambridge University, is one of the skeptics. He says that asking if a computer can think is like asking if a submarine can swim. That means that though the machine is doing something akin to what a human can do, it is not the same thing at all. But that does bring us to the question of what do we mean when we say, can a human being think? What does it mean for a human to think? Consider how a child develops. Clip art, it's lovely. Children go through distinct phases of learning how to think. Could we make a computer that learns like a child? Now, with babies, we accept a baby as part of the human race, with the potential to become an adult, the potential to become a fully functioning member of society, even though a baby can do very little yet. Could we accept a computer in the same way? What would it mean to do that? We have this saying, it takes a village to raise a child. A child cannot be raised in isolation from other humans. If you try to do that, you create a monster. We know that from the small number of children who have been raised outside society. Relationships between human beings are super important to what it means to be human. Our minds are developed in society through relationships with others. For example, you may think that it is obvious that you should be kind to other people. But that idea of kindness is simply one way to construct a society. And it's one that arises from a concept of the value of human beings that you will find, for example, in Jesus' teaching. But you could construct a society differently, and people have. There are societies where you raise the children to believe that honor is the most important thing, such as in some Hindu cultures, or stoicism, as in ancient Sparta, or obedience is most important, as in North Korea, or dominance, as in many tribal societies. The idea of being kind to other people comes from the idea that humans have an intrinsic value, which can in turn arise from the Christian idea that humans are lovable and valuable to God in and of themselves, without having to do anything to earn that love. And while I accept there are many good people in the world, Christian or otherwise, who are doing good things, it's notable that there are disproportionately many Christians in professions where they care for those who could be judged to have nothing to offer. So the mentally ill, the frail and elderly, disadvantaged children. However, there are also people in our society who do not hold the view that others should be intrinsically valued, and instead value people by what they can do for me, or in how much money they have, or in their popularity. And you'll find that even in New Zealand, we have people who hold very different value systems. Now, if we're going to build artificial intelligences, how do we ensure that they embody the values that we value? And whose values will they have? Will it be a value system that says profit is the be-all and end-all? Will it be a value system that says each individual human matters? Will it be something else? We might like to think that an artificial intelligence would be automatically kind to us and realise that we are important and we matter. But that's something that you actually have to build into the system, the same way we build it into our children as they grow up. One simple example of what could go wrong, which is used by many AI researchers, is that we could build an artificial intelligence whose job is to manufacture paperclips. And it's told, please make as many paperclips as you can, as efficiently as possible. A sufficiently powerful AI could take that literally and convert the entire planet into paperclips. Job done. Because it didn't have the controls to know that, no, we didn't mean kill everybody, wasn't in the programming. Now that's a really silly example, but it shows that if you fail to build in the safeguards of a value system, you can get really perverse outcomes. And you don't need to imagine powerful AIs to see that. Human history is littered with this. Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We have history littered with powerful dictators who discover that no one will stop them from doing something outrageous. So very like a toddler or a teenager, they push from one outrage to the next. Will they stop me from doing this or this? So from this, I believe that our immediate problem is not that some strong AI is going to come along as an all-powerful oppressor. The challenge for us today, our immediate concern is that weak AI is there and it works, and it is being used by bad people to do bad things to other people. So it's people are the problem. For example, the Chinese government is developing a social credit system which uses artificial intelligence methods to calculate every citizen's credit score. And the score depends on how good you are, how much you toe the party line, whether you're doing the right thing, who you're friends with, how your relatives are behaving. And the score will determine what rewards and punishments a citizen will receive based on their economic and their personal behaviour. And some types of punishment they're trialling at the moment include bans on long-distance travel, so you can't go by train or plane, exclusion from certain jobs. It's all made possible by AI. And that may sound like Big Brother. It is like Big Brother. But we already have something similar. We have the credit score that your bank uses to determine if it should give you a loan. We have likes and ratings on Facebook, Uber, and Amazon. In China, it's like that on steroids, and it's going to affect everything a Chinese citizen does when it's fully rolled out in 2020, which is 2 years away. Now, I admit we have some good counterexamples of those who've used the power of things like AI for good. For example, if we go back 150 years to the Industrial Revolution, many business owners used their power to force their workers to work 15 or 16 hours a day. They had no qualms about employing 10-year-old children to work incredibly long hours. They had no qualms about shoving people into horrendous working conditions. But there were people, such as Titus Salt and Joseph Rowntree and the Cadbury family, who used their wealth to create model villages to improve the lives of their workers. And they operated from a different value system to the ruthless exploiters. And those people are lauded today as visionary philanthropists, perhaps illustrating how rare such behaviour was in the sea of capitalist misery. But also, those people were the seeds by which we got unionisation and we got society much more equalised. Now, today, we already see the beginnings of an AI-mediated misery like in the Industrial Revolution. At Amazon, where you get all your lovely goods from, the workers in the warehouses filling your orders are given lists of products to collect. And the lists are given by the AI system that works out what's the best path to work your way through the warehouse to make the collection as efficiently as possible. It knows how fast the workers can move and how fast they can collect stuff, and it can refine its system as it gets more data to push the workers right up to the limits of what a human is capable of doing, with a reward and punishment system in place to encourage the humans to follow what the AI tells it to do. And rumours are that the system has got to the point where you cannot push the humans any harder. Now this sounds very like the ancient slave galleys in the Mediterranean, where the slave master knew just how hard you could push the slaves before they broke. And you just take them right up to there, but not over the line. But at least with a slave master, there was a sliver of hope that you could appeal to your common humanity, your common basis in society. With an AI system, there isn't. So let's talk about that common humanity. Being human is not just about having an intelligence, about having a mind. It's about developing that mind within the community, within the family, within the society. Being human is about relationship. And that fits well with our Christian theology of having a relationship with God and one another. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. So how could an artificial intelligence become part of a community? And I think that comes down to embodiment, We are embodied intelligences. That means our intelligence resides in a physical body. And embodied intelligence seems to be key to what makes us human. There is an absolute process in which he addresses the question of what happens after you die. In that letter, he asserts that we will all be physically resurrected into a new physical body in the same way that Jesus was at his resurrection. So let me just read this out to you. It's in the Bible in Paul's first letter to the church at Corinth in Greece. So Paul writes, "Now, brothers, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and in which you stand firm. By this gospel you are saved if you hold firmly to the word I preached you. Otherwise you have believed in vain. For what I received I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scripture, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day according to the scripture, and that he appeared to Peter, and then to the 12 disciples, and then to more than 500 brothers at once, most of whom are still alive, though some have died. Then he appeared to James, and then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me." But if someone is preaching that Christ has not been raised from the dead, how can some of you, but if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you now say that there is no resurrection of the dead? If there's no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised, and if Christ hasn't been raised, our preaching is worthless, and so is your faith. If Christ hasn't been raised, your faith is futile, you're still in your sins, and those who have died have perished. If our hope in Christ is for this life alone, we are to be pitied more than all people. But someone's going to ask, how are the dead raised? What kind of body will they come back with? Well, what you sow doesn't come to life unless it dies, and what you sow is not the body that will be, but just a seed, maybe of wheat or something. So it will be with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable, what is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonour, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. Now you may or may not be convinced by Paul's argument, as with many of his arguments, but there is no getting around the fact that the early church firmly believed in physical resurrection. And that seems so different to the physical resurrection, yes, there we go. That's so different to the sorts of cultural things you latch onto, that it's all fluffy clouds and harps and stuff. But even in this painting, even though you could say this is supposed to be a picture of heaven, these are embodiments. There are bodies. So the Christian's future hope is not about floating around as disembodied spirits communing with other disembodied spirits. Our future hope, according to this bit of the Bible, is to be resurrected into some sort of physical body. And it seems that the human envisaged in the Bible is body, mind, and spirit, and that you cannot separate those three aspects. So when the body and mind die, we believe the spirit's what remains, but the promise in that bit of the Bible is that a new body will be provided and a new mind to house the spirit. So being human is really, really strongly tied to being an embodied mind. So that gets us back to robots, an embodiment with an AI mind. It looks as if our fascination with robots is owing to our own embodiment. So could you give an artificial intelligence a robot body that would help it to develop as a thinking being? Could this be the clue that a brain in a box is never going to be like we are? It needs a body, a physical body. But if you're going to develop this, like bringing a child up, could we provide a robot with a society that would allow it to develop as an individual? Should we bring up an AI robot in the way we bring up a human child? What fascinating questions. But we're nearly out of time. So this has been a very fast skim over a wide range of topics. So what are the practical messages? You've heard a lot. What practical things can you take away? So I'm going to finish with 4 very quick points. First of all, I believe the church must work actively to make our society better in the face of the massive changes that are coming. Second, I think there are some massive ethical problems that come from the increasing use of artificial intelligence and the dehumanization of decision making, and I think the church is well placed with centuries of expertise to grapple with those questions and to contribute to that discussion. Third, I think the church is a place that can affirm that community, that relationship is vital to the full development of human beings, and maybe there's a hint there that it could be vital to the developing of artificial intelligences. And finally, I think the church should campaign that we always, in the political, social, technological sphere, we always put humans and human relationships at the heart of what we do. If you believe that you have an eternal soul, then what you're going to carry off into eternity is not the possessions you have or the things you've made, but it will be the content of your character and the influence you have had on other people's characters. We are all fearfully and wonderfully made. Let us recognize that in one another. Thank you.
It's on. It's good. Thank you very much, Neil. Extremely stimulating stuff. I will rove around with a microphone and collect questions from the audience. Just while I've got the microphone, I sort of have a wondering of my own, which is around that diagram of cockroach, mouse, cat,
yep.
all black. And it kind of made me think about cockroach jobs, like jobs that only need that level of intelligence to do. Perhaps I'm just thinking about say the people who maybe made my shirt in Bangladesh or wherever. It seems like those jobs and lots of others, but particularly that sort of job is on the way out. But what I'm worried about is just that sort of centralisation thing. Like, if you don't need a whole lot of people to sort of put shirts together in Bangladesh, you have a small number of shareholders who sort of get the wealth instead. What do we do about that kind of spreading the wealth around thing?
It's social realism. So first of all, there's a bunch of jobs that it's much cheaper to get a human to do than a robot, like cleaning the toilets. Nobody wants to do it, but getting a robot to do it would be quite difficult, and human beings are pretty good at that. But there are other jobs, like cutting clothes out. There are already robots that do that. So it's a matter of economics. What's cheaper? Is it cheaper to have a machine do it, or to have some humans who are paid a pittance to do it? And as the humans campaign for better conditions, do they get shoved out? And we actually saw that in the Industrial Revolution, that people trying to campaign for better conditions got punished for doing so, and the employers really pushed that the employers could make enormous profits at the expense of people working for almost nothing. How did we get out of that mess? That's a good question.
Unions would be one answer, maybe?
Unions are one answer. So why then do you have employers in this country pushing really, really hard to destroy the value of the unions when the unions actually did good stuff for more people? So there's this push and shove. Do we have a society where we value money above everything else? I went to a seminar the other day where we were talking about Mauri and how you embody that when you're applying for money from the government. And you don't just look at the financial bottom line, you have to look at the social bottom line, the environmental bottom line. You're looking at the whole picture rather than just this narrow view of everything is reduced to money. I don't have answers to this. I hope somebody in the audience can have answers to that.
Thank you. At the back.
This is on that note, and maybe you'll have a response to this that can help answer the question. But there are people who talk about post-scarcity as a place that the world could reach, and how artificial intelligence and robotic production, etc., could mean that when there's no labour for people and we're forced into a place where there's so much unemployment that we cannot structure society around things like employment because robots are producing it all, that that will actually be of potential good to society, and we can restructure society around important things like relationships and culture and that kind of thing. Are there people, rather than just the philosophers, but in computer sciences, who are talking about this and who see any hope for such an optimistic take on the AI takeover?
There are people who are optimistic about AI and how it will do great good and allow us to solve medical problems. But if you want a society like that, you're going to have to let the AI systems take over and trust them, because it's pretty clear we can't trust anybody. History, there are some people you could trust to be good, but generally, if there's power to be had, people who want power go for it. But would we, at what point do we trust ourselves that some all-knowing artificial intelligence will look after us? I think there's going to be quite a lot of pain before we get there if we do. And if you look at New Zealand at the moment, for example, we export over half the food we make. We make a phenomenal amount of food, far more than is needed to feed our population, and yet there are people in New Zealand who go to bed hungry. Why? It doesn't make sense. Well, it does if you look at a capitalist economy, because you make more money by exporting the stuff. But how have we got ourselves into? How do we get out of this position to a position where we can have this utopia you're describing, given that human beings are the way they are? I don't know. Anybody got a cheerful question?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. That was really good. I do have some worries, though, in that you go from being the scientist on the one hand to be the believer in supernaturalism on the other.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you take God as a postulate. Everybody else here takes your, obviously believes perhaps in your view that God is is a singular entity. There's only one of them. Somehow they manufactured us all, and that has got certain qualities and demands love. I would say that any being that demands love doesn't respect it. However, I think that you've gone to say that your view of the Bible and what Paul says in terms of how we're going to eventually end up is highly hypothetical, and you give no reason to believe that actually, for us, an atheist, is true. And then you go on to compare it to artificial intelligence, which is a completely scientific and rational subject, and I'm sitting here wondering anyway where that immortal soul came from that you parked in the cupboard at the beginning of the lecture. I just happen to think that this it's just so inconsistent that you've just taken these postulates, assumed that they were true, and everything else on the intelligence scale is related to that. It just seems absurd to me. Thank you.
So yes, you and quite a lot of philosophers over the centuries. So I've been reading some philosophy of questions of, does an animal have a soul? And you read, so you can take the, you can throw the Christian theology away and say, no, this idea of a soul is nonsense, because there is no scientific evidence for there being a soul that's separate from the physical mind. We're not quite sure how the mind is created from the physical matter, but we're sure that as scientists we will get there. That the mind is an emergent behaviour, and that when you die, that's it. Nothing less on beyond that. And I think what this early Christian theology was going on, it was grappling with that of what could it possibly mean to be disembodied nothingness?
But why does Christianity trump the other religions? Why not say the Hindus or the Muslims or any other religion? Why do you focus on the Christian?
Because I'm a Christian, so I know this stuff. So it's interesting that reincarnation is not part of conventional Christian theology, where it is a fundamental part of Hindu and Buddhist belief. But if you go back to those Christian philosophers, they started to go, well, actually, if you start to think about immortal souls and you start to believe that animals do have souls, you have to start going, then we have to allow them to be reincarnated into human bodies at some point in the great cycle, so they have a chance of this Christian redemption. You get yourself tied into wonderful theological knots. But yes, I've come to this from a Christian point of view because I'm doing this in the church. Tim told me to. No, I don't think it's because Tim tells me to.
I'm aware that it's been entirely male voices so far this evening, and perhaps the other half of the human race may like to ask a question, so please signal me if that is so.
did you bring soul into it at all?
I brought soul into it because when you're reading through the Bible, it's really clear that they believed there was not just the body and the mind, but there was this immortal thing that connected together, that was a soul.
Yes, but while we're talking about mind and artificial intelligence, what does soul have to do with it?
If you take the scientific view, it's got absolutely nothing. It's a continuum of intelligence, and soul has nothing to do with it. I thought, as a really good way to get this talk going, asking, can a computer have a soul, is a good way to grab people's interest. But actually, the question of can a machine have a soul, as I said, it's unanswerable. It's not a scientific question. And as Alan Turing said in his paper, I'm going to dismiss this argument quickly. If souls exist, then God can perfectly easily give a soul to a machine. End of argument. Let's go on with the next argument. He has to demolish 8 other arguments about why a machine can't think after that one, including the argument about extrasensory perception, which to a modern ears you go, where'd that come from?
Well, for me, it's the same question. Where does soul come from?
Where does soul come? And that's a question that philosophers have studied for centuries. So is the soul pre-existing? Is it something that the two parents of a child, the soul, somehow create a baby soul? That was a position that, don't know if that was a position some philosophers actually held. Does the soul pop into existence? Now, if we forget about soul, let's think about mind. How does a child's mind develop? Because that's much easier to grab hold of. We actually have developmental psychologists who can talk about it. And a child's mind clearly develops through various stages. Why? Does a cat's mind do the same thing? Do we have different types of mind because we're human to animals? Is a dolphin or a monkey or a gorilla, are they closer to us, or are humans the special thing? And some theologians would argue that no, humans are this special thing, especially blessed by God, and everything else isn't. There's not a lot of evidence for that. But you sort of think, I can understand, a cat is probably I come back to the cat because I know cats. A cat, I can imagine the cat's thinking, but I can't imagine a cockroach is thinking. But is the cat really thinking? So there's all sorts of, I've basically given you a whole bunch of unanswerable questions. And I hope you go away and think about some of them and go and do your own thinking and your own research about what do I really think. I think I definitely came here tonight to present you with far more questions than I have managed to answer.
My question's around kind of the impending unemployment that you talked about that is very likely to happen with AI developments. And one of the responses in terms of social policy response I've heard floated is the UBI, the Universal Basic Income. I was wondering if you could explain that and if you have any thoughts on that particular response.
So the idea here is that, as I understand it, everybody gets a universal basic income from the government, no means testing at all, you just get the money, you can spend it on what you like. And then if you want to work, you get extra money on top of that. So everybody actually is able to live. And it sounds like probably the only way we can make this work, unless we want to be very neoliberal and say, okay, if you can't get a job, it's your fault, toughies, if you and your family starve, we don't care. Which is not a position the church would take, but there's a position some extreme neoliberals would take, that it's entirely your own fault that you're poor. Now, that's a position you can validly hold if there appear to be just about enough jobs to go around, but when there aren't, it all starts falling apart. And I think we're seeing in some political circles that people are starting to say, well, this just doesn't work anymore. We need to construct society in a new way. But if you look at the previous examples of how you do this, which is take a communist society, so under Stalinism, where everybody gets a basic income, and nobody does the job well, because who cares whether you do the job well or not, you still get the same income. So things just sort of grind to a halt. So it's how do you incentivize people who want to work, and what do we do? How much autonomy do we give people to go to hell in their own way, as it were, and how much does society control them? I haven't answered the question, I've just thrown a whole bunch more questions out at you.
I just wanted to pick up on two of your earlier points.
Yep.
Firstly, this is the perspective that I did a fair bit of study in. Systems thinking, describing consciousness or self-awareness as an emergent property. And secondly, just picking up on your estimate, the estimate of, was it a singularity or the singularity? The singularity in terms of artificial intelligence. Does that estimate of 20 to 30 years, is it based, as far as you know, on a developing artificial intelligence that develops the next one, or is it discounting entirely the possibility of some kind of emergent intelligence?
It's based on, yes, the weak AIs will help us to get towards that superhuman intelligence. As soon as a futurologist says something's going to happen 30 years in the future, you get very cautious, because all the, I've read quite a bit of past history of the future of technology, so people predicting what's going to happen. And if they're predicting what's happening over the next 5 years, they tend to be really conservative and really get it wrong. Technology tends to develop faster than you expect in the next 5 years. But once you start extrapolating 30 years, you get it totally wrong. It's really, really hard to see what's going on. So, for example, fusion power has been the technology of the future for the last 70 years. It's always been 30 years away. It still is 30 years away. So the singularity predictions are based on predicting where computers are going in terms of their power and what we're able to do. I think the deep learning thing was a bit of a blip in that suddenly it accelerated some of the things we could do. It could be that somebody could make an enormous breakthrough and suddenly in 5 years' time we have a super intelligent computer that's trying to take over the country. I doubt that. And if you don't believe in this intelligence spectrum, then it's never going to happen, because you'll just keep developing more and more clever AI systems that just do what they're trained to do. Though you could argue that human beings are simply very, very clever machines that are just trained to do what they do. And again, I have not answered the question. And I acknowledge that.
I think we probably have time for roughly 2 questions. I saw a hand.
No, says that 2 questions, not 2 answers.
I've just got a question, Neil, about the educational model that you were talking about, the possible real benefits of current weak AI stuff. And you said there that imagine a computer that could enable a child to grow to its fullest potential and flourishing and work on its weaknesses and so forth. And I just found myself wondering about whether the weaknesses are something you want to banish exactly. I mean, obviously in a particular child's grappling a particular problem you might want to, but ultimately, is it partly in accepting our weaknesses and our limits and our flaws and our dependence that where our humanity resides? I think about my 7-year-old son who's convinced that he's going to be playing cricket for New Zealand before he's about 12. He's useless at cricket, and one day, not useless, he's not that good, and one day he's going to have to realise, oh, I'm actually not that good at cricket, and his integrated humanity is going to depend upon accepting those limits, and all these sort of models of ever-growing technological power seem to me completely blind to that facet of who we are. So why would we want to get rid of weakness? That's my question.
Well, we don't need to get rid of our weakness, but how do you train a child to cope with their weakness? How do you get the child to acknowledge that that's something that they're not good at, and therefore you've got to find a coping mechanism? So if you're dyslexic, you can't spell, what coping mechanisms do you give them to be able to still function in society with having that problem? So that's a question of, I want the AI system to do what a really, I'm imagining what it used to be like for really rich kids. they would have a personal tutor who would look after them and educate them and could tailor the education to where the child's interests were and steer the child to what would make them most happy as an adult. And I'm imagining that for every child, that you can actually say, you can have a personal tutor who's with you and guides you. Of course, this can also be corrupted. You can have, say, the people who control the education system decide that what actually we need is a bunch of passive consumers who will buy lots of stuff. Let's train up the kids to do that instead. So it could go horribly wrong. So I don't think we're saying the systems will get rid of your weaknesses. It will show you how most effectively to play to your strengths and to cope with where you need to cope with the weaknesses, the same way a parent does with a child, where eventually you're going to have to tell your son, I'm sorry, this isn't going to happen, and explain why, but perhaps at 7 it's a bit too young. Let him dream a bit longer.
Perhaps he'll watch the recording and realise it. Last question.
About what he was talking about, how will the children get their social level up if they're always on the computer?
So we've got to arrange this so that they're not always on the computer. So an AI system on the computer can only go so far. You need, as I said, a human being has to grow up in society. You don't want children to be locked in a room and learn everything from a computer. You've got to learn how to interact with other human beings to be part of society. So there's an enormous role here for the human teacher to be able to do all the group work and socialising the kids and making them go out and play games in the playground and getting off their devices. But you can also imagine a teacher who is in the classroom with 30 children, and each of those children has their own personal tutor helping them. So imagine how expensive it would be for the New Zealand education system to put a trained teacher in every classroom and have 30 adult helpers, one alongside each child. Imagine if we could do something like that. Imagine how your education would be different if you actually had somebody who understood you really well and could help you with the stuff that you struggle with. And I'm trying to imagine a future where everybody could reach their potential, because at the moment we have a whole bunch of kids in schools where there are other kids who are disruptive, the education is disrupted, the teachers keep changing. Yes, they get an education, but it's not the best that could be for them. And you can imagine that this could be utterly, utterly wonderful. This AI stuff could change the lives of the next generation of kids to be so much better than our lives. That's a really good place to stop, I think.
It is. Thank you, Neil. Can we give a round of applause? Thank you very much, Neil. Very stimulating and in places controversial material. Feel free to hang around and grab another drink or buttonhole Neil or talk amongst yourselves for as long as you wish. As we are in a church, I'd like to close by reading a prayer from the New Zealand Anglican prayer book, a night prayer. And you can translate God however you wish that suits you. Lord, it is night. The night is for stillness. Let us be still in the presence of God. It is night after a long day. What has been done has been done. What has not been done has not been done. Let it be. The night is dark. Let our fears of the darkness of the world and of our own lives rest in you. The night is quiet. Let the quietness of your peace enfold us, all dear to us, and all who have no peace. The night heralds the dawn. Let us look expectantly to a new day, new joys, new possibilities. In your name we pray. Amen.